What's up, family? Welcome back to the Stop Sinking Show, where we go from struggle to flow. Escape your judgment jail. Today, we're exploring the topic of judgment and how it is housing everything. The tendency to judge is one of the main primary emotions that governs what is created, all the technology that is created to grab your attention. The need for validation and judgment are probably the driving forces of most of our social atmosphere. Think about how you wake up in the morning. You wake up in the morning, open up your Instagram feed, watch people's stories and see their posts, and constantly attribute some value number to these people. You see people who you know have expressed an opposing view maybe in the past, or people who you've had some possible contention with in the past, or people you have unresolved psychological matters with. You see them on your feed, for some reason you still open up their Instagrams, and there begins the voice in your head while you scroll. Oh, that person's dumb. Oh, that person doesn't see it fully. Oh, he's still living like that? Oh, she still believes that? Oh, when will they learn? You're doing this constantly. Constantly sizing up the value of other people while throwing subtle shade at them the entire time. We do this without effort, although not without its sticky consequences. If you are sensitive enough to the feelings in your body, you can recognize that this activity does not make you feel good, or makes you feel good with undue and unearned means, undue pride and hubris in comparison to other people. Much of reality TV is designed around the same emotion. Oh, I'm messed up, but at least I'm not as messed up as these people. Look at how they act, fight like animals, or can't keep their life together. At least I'm better than them. It's just designed to feed our judgment and make us feel better about ourselves. There is a dark side to all this judgment. Judgment is a voluntary prison, a self-evoked sentence. And its feedback loops traps you into old patterns, seeking confirmation bias towards past insecurities on which you have already escalated commitment. We have strong commitments to the ways that we see the world. We identify with our perceptions. We let them define us and guide us in our way through life. So when we encounter someone who doesn't exhibit their behavior to line up with our ideals, we judge them harshly for it. We tend not to extend any mercy, at least in our brutal thoughts. We see a small glimpse, one misalignment to our liking, and then attribute several other criteria to this person. Oh, they must be like this and that because they like this specific thing. We are so afraid of the unknown that we take small fractions of information of people and try to paint onto them with broad brushstrokes all the other characteristics that we assume from that small fraction. It makes it more manageable and less scary to deal with people when we can size them up in this way. Although many times we are wrong, but it doesn't stop us from doing this constantly on the fly. This is an evolutionary mechanism to protect ourselves, but it is unfit and mismatched for the non-threatening existence that we lead today. The problem with this fear of unknown-based mismatch, combined with our tendency to constantly look for ways to deal with our insecurities, it tends to turn against us. Our fear of the unknown, combined with our insecurities and how we cope with them, turns against us. The power of the healthy judgment that's required when you have an ideal turns toxic. especially when those ideals are not clearly defined and most likely self-assigned through your past voids. Our ideals are allowed to judge us. It's even necessary for them to do so. But when you set your ideals carelessly, you start to create a life that is misaligned with where you might be trying to go. I'll give an example of this and how I got to thinking about this. This was a realization that clicked for me one day while we were driving back from LAX to my place. I had just dropped off one of my friends, and on the way back, I realized the place that judgment in general had in my life and what place it held. It started with the recognition of one of these insecurities that I outwardly project as judgment. For some reason, when I drive on the highway, and it's amazing that I'm even admitting this out loud, for some reason, when I drive on the highway and I see a couple, two people, a guy and a girl in the car together, but I notice that the girl is looking out the window and possibly making eye contact with other drivers or me, that somehow her looking out the window is a sign of her unhappiness and her unfaithfulness. And because maybe in the past I've been insecure in my own relationship about the attention diverted or the jealous categorization of my own girl looking out the window being attributed to her lack of interest in me and maybe more in someone else, that I automatically had this judgment and perspective on what I thought of this action of her looking out the window, driving back from LAX. Somehow I was able to be more subtle than these automatic triggers of judgment and noticed and traced back where this judgment came from. Then I had further thoughts about how else I might be judging casually. Ways of seeing the world that casually picked up in the past when feeling less than fully secure about something or someone. I had to recognize that everyone has different expectations of themselves, different expressions, different aspirations in life. Not having this recognition forces me to put people in comfortable little boxes in which I can see and understand them, so I can minimize the surprises by trying to assume their makeup. The lack of understanding this or keeping it in my mind causes me to frame things irrationally in several ways. One of those ways, and the most obvious, is the fact that it causes me to judge people who live differently than I do. And this can be for better or worse. And this is what's turning against me. It also causes and creates self-doubt in fear of being judged, the same way that I'm judging other people for living their way. While I'm judging, in a way, I am solidifying my own fear of being judged. And I started to think, when listening to a Drake song, should a person living their life and pursuing their art have to be burdened by the thought of judgment of someone, of my judgment? Would any poetry exist if the poet was concerned of their diction and meter being judged by the reader? Would any lyrics exist if the songwriter tried to rhyme and flow to someone else's idea of expression? If the driving force of each bar was the weight of another's judgment, would any lyricist ever finish the sentence? No. These people have to have a level of self-confidence or just a belief that their own unique perspective is worth something. And being in touch with that fact that everyone has their own perspectives and aspirations frees them to pursue their own. So our judgment, when we sit and compare and cannot grasp how someone else can think differently than us, that projected judgment onto them solidifies our own. It jails us to the possibility of being judged by somebody else, and only the recognition that everyone is allowed to have their own choice, their own ways of living life, and their own ways of finishing their sentences. Only when you understand that and allow that and accept it, it frees you to do that for yourself, to express yourself. Judgments are just projections of our own shortcomings. You can only see what you are sensitive to. So how would you even judge somebody for something specific if you weren't sensitive in that spot? It's something that you have noticed about yourself. Your judgment of someone else is an extension of that understanding. It's an extension of you, of where you hurt, where you fall short, what you wish you saw more of. Judgment, in a way, is externalized self-hate, or a lack of self-love, if we don't like the word hate. It is an easier way to point out the broken in someone else. We always pass judgment on someone else and attribute it to their character, versus when falling short in the same way ourselves, we attribute it to circumstance. We tend to judge others by their behavior and ourselves by our intentions. You wouldn't pass the test of your own harsh judgment. You would fall short. This judgment that's jailing your contribution. The more you judge, the less likely you are to produce anything of value. Your own judgment of someone else also handcuffs you to your own. When you think something bad about someone else, at the same time, you stop your own flow. To protect yourself from people like you who sit and judge, your flow stops because you recognize that people are sitting there like you. And the greatest reminder of that is your active judgment. You are aware of the ugly nature of your own judgment on some level and don't want to be scrutinized in the same way. Who would? So the more you casually judge, the more you constrict your own becoming. Those judgments aren't casual at all. They disrupt your becoming and short-circuit the part of you that tries. Because you don't want to try badly and be subjected to the same casual judgment from someone else. This idea of judgment has played a big part in my life. I moved to the States from India when I was about 12 years old, a little bit shy of that. And I was 17 different people before I was 16 years old. In the 4-year span of time, I tried on everything for size. I was constantly pierced by what I thought were judgments of other people. Constantly willing to mold myself to fit my new group of friends. Willing to do anything just to be accepted. I didn't consciously know I was doing this at the time. It wasn't until I made firm choices on who I wanted to be and what I was willing to accept that I started to solidify. In a way, being all those people ended up being positive because I got to experience a lot of different ways of being in a fast time. From styles of music to ways of dressing to hairstyles to all other ego identifications that people use to outwardly express their identity. I defined my own identity after trying all of these for size. It took me a long time. Probably because of this, or in spite of it. My identity then ended up being one that was unapologetic in the assessment and agreement of others' opinions, because judgment matters so much to me. After trying so many things, I decided who I was willing to be and what I would stand for and what I would rebut in conversations and set course on who I was becoming. To the point where no one would believe that I ever had this phase in life. If you met me today, none of my friends would ever tell you that I can be convinced to do anything. that I was at all able to be peer pressured into any activity or ways of thinking. I hardened in all the ways where I was clay from when I first came here. And although judgment when you're a kid is more abrupt in its presence, more obtuse, more present, because kids are harsh and they share their judgments openly. There's no mercy provided when someone makes fun of your teeth, your hairstyle, or the way you speak. I had an accent. Or you can't pronounce the letter V. These judgments were like a pressure cooker for a budding teenager. I still remember the day it was pointed out to me that I couldn't say the letter V. We don't have that letter in our language. We say it differently. We say we. So I remember that day like it was yesterday. I took a hall pass. I took a trip to the water fountain. And by the time I was back in that class 10 minutes later, I knew how to say the letter V. My sense of security, judgment meant so much to me that finding out where I failed caused me and put me in so much pain and put so much pressure that I put that pressure on myself and I was able to advance the shortcomings people noticed. So thank you, haters. Even the fact that I don't have an accent today is a symptom of all that pressure I put on myself. But where kids are harsh and open and upfront about their judgments, what judgment has now transformed into is much more subtle and harder to uncover. There's probably roots and traces back to these earlier parts of my life that govern my thoughts today, that are so internalized, just like that driving in the car, and have become my own voice, and I've adopted them as my own beliefs and accepted them as my shortcomings. These could have been these voices of criticism from the people I was growing up with, voices of my parents, any criticism from my environment. All of it now sits in the bed of my subconscious, just subtly hiding its effect on my decision making. Quick synapse while I'm driving 80 miles an hour on the highway, looking to the left, seeing somebody look out the window, and immediately, within a split second, passing a judgment that traces back to my insecurity. These have become the voices from which I judge other people, because you have been hurt there before, and you know those places hurt, and you know they are most likely to hurt others, most likely where others fail too. So we are all in this cycle of negative believed judgments about ourselves projected onto all the ways that we perceive other people, keeping them distant from us. Negative judgments about ourselves that we can only see when we project them onto other people at a distance, keeping us from having relationships with people who we see in this way, because they remind us the worst of us. We use them as the face of that judgment, that if carefully traced back is the face of a judgment you accepted about yourself, but are so desperate in your fight against it that you constantly assign it to faces in your life that you dare not get close to, people you keep away at a distance, because it's too painful to see, because you don't want to be associated with it or what you call them. So how do we fix ourselves with this understanding where you judge people? When you judge people for their expression, the only way to free them of your judgment is by expressing yourself freely, or the other way around. When you free them of your judgment, you'll be freed of theirs. So either express yourself fully and freely, to brute force your way through your own negative judgment that you are projecting and attributing to other people as as them being the face of it. Either express yourself fully to force yourself through that judgment, and you will naturally free other people of your judgment, or start on the opposite end. Free them of your judgment, and you will automatically be freed of theirs, because you won't be reminding yourself that there's the ugliness of the kind of judgment that you hold and exercise on a daily basis. That judgment that you suppose anyway. Because unless someone is really judging you out loud, most of that is just a voice of your own judgment in your head. And the problem with judgment is, once you open the doors to the courtroom, everyone is on trial. You're on trial. Everyone's on trial. No one is safe from judgment once you open the doors to the courtroom. This is an endless loop. You judge someone else, really in a way where you're judging yourself. Then its expression of that judgment keeps you from doing something and trying something in fear of judgment. All of it started from your judgment, trapped by your own lack of grace, your own lack of space that you can give someone else to be however they want to be, so you can be however you want to be. When I bind you in my judgment, I bind myself in my suffering. Judgment jail. Free yourself. No one else is looking past themselves anyway. Free yourself. No one can see past themselves. Their judgment of you, if it does exist, is similar to your judgment of them. It's just them seeing themselves. Even the judgment that might come your way in the same regard is just a reflection of that person. And if those people really judged you that way out loud, would you be friends with them? Would their opinion even matter to you? What you are hearing is your own judgment of yourself. I had a friend of mine share this judgment that we externalize in a story of her being in a yoga class. And in the middle of the yoga class, she had to, while everyone was doing the positions, she had to walk out of the room for a second. And as she walked out of the room and walked back, for some reason, she felt that everyone's eyes were on her. And all the heinous ways that they must be thinking of her, possibly disturbing the class, possibly walking around, and all the other judgments that she has personal to her. She's using the eyes of other people watching her walk through this class and attributing to them all the thoughts that they must be thinking about her, but she has no way of knowing that they must be thinking about her. And she feels timid walking around, feeling smaller than she should, because she thinks that these people are thinking this certain type of way about her, when it's really her own judgment of herself that she is projecting onto the room. And if those people really had those judgments, would they even matter to you? Would those people, would you stand for them if they really expressed the kind of ways that you think about yourself? You're doing the work for them to judge. They may not even have any such judgments. But because you feel at a lack in all the places where you are aware, you weaponize that awareness against yourself and attribute them to others. You assign them to other people as their thoughts. But how could you even know that it's their thoughts? Your experience outside, what you see in the eyes of others, is being assigned by your own eyes. You say, oh, those eyes when staring at me too long mean blank, and fill in the blank with all the horrible things that you think about yourself. Oh, they see this scar. Oh, they must see my big nose. Oh, they're judging my eyebrows. Oh, they must think this or that. We're so hurt. People in New York will fight you if you stare at them too long. How hurt must you be? What makes us take offense to the interest someone else takes in us while standing in a long train ride, or while sitting in a park, or walking down the street? We take offense because we are projecting onto them all the horrible things they must see about us that we know exist. Interpret ice grilling as their way of saying he's blessed. That would be a better way. Joe Budden lyric. Instead of getting mad at them looking at you, interpret that stare, that extra attention that they're giving you. Or maybe they're just lost in thought, but interpret that ice grilling. Instead of it being thoughts of negativity, interpret it as them just thinking that you are blessed. There must be something worth looking at there. What people think is not confirmed, so why not have a positive story? And what they think is really not any of your business anyway. Trust me, you don't want to know what people think. It's not a superpower that anyone should desire. Because even we ourselves are disgusted and repulsed by our own thoughts. The 10,000 thoughts a day that you have can't all be valued with equal weight. So who cares what someone is thinking at a specific moment, passing in time? What matters is what you think about yourself. And this is where this entire thing starts and ends. It's the paradox of your own judgment, the jail that you are putting yourself in. There's really no other way of freeing yourself of judgment and to really live and do all the things that you are afraid to do than to first stop judging yourself. There's no other way to stop that tendency to scroll social media or view different ways other people choose to live and assign it an undesirable value. If you want to free yourself from this jail, you have to stop this tendency. The only other way is to just be a waste of life and just be a wallflower. To avoid criticism and judgment, do nothing, say nothing, and be nothing. Just sit on a shelf in a refrigerator and preserve all you could be. You'll be safe from the judgment of others, but not your own. You'll probably still eat yourself up inside. Judgment is God's business. It's not your business. In the Bible, after an attempt to be killed and abandoned or sold to slavery by his brothers, Joseph teaches us that judgment is not for us. When seeing them again, now Joseph being the most powerful man in Egypt next to the Pharaoh, faced with the remorse of his brothers who at the time didn't even recognize him, who had come to Egypt with their hands out during a drought, not knowing that their brother was still alive, he offered them grace and us this lesson. Joseph told them, "Don't be afraid of me. Am I God to judge you and punish you? As far as I'm concerned, God turned into good what you meant for evil. He brought me to the high position I have today so I could save the lives of many people." His lack of judgment and the weight of carrying his hurt everywhere, I'm sure, contributed to him reaching the heights he did regardless of his disadvantages. He shed that weight. He didn't carry around that hurt. And I'm sure that contributed to the heights that he reached. Escape your judgment jail. Don't let the ceiling of judgment house you. Be free. I love you always.